Hello and welcome again to Cards and Cardboard. Today we're going to be reviewing kind of a personal favorite of mine and honestly quite a few other people. This is a game that's been around for over 30 years, has been reprinted by multiple companies, and has had pretty much the same two designers kind of tweaking on it year after year and expansion after expansion. So without further ado, we're looking at Cosmic Encounter. Cosmic Encounter is kind of an interesting game in the fact that it's got a set of rules here that are all very much, something that you're going to play around with, understand, and you're not going to deviate from it that much, except that you actually have all these crazy alien powers and asymmetric gameplays that are going to kind of mess with that base set of rules. Think of it as a little bit of a BattleCon experience where you have kind of the similar rule set, but then every character brings something new to the table and really throws it out the window. So what we're going to do is going to take it in the box, kind of show you what I got here. I do have a few expansions in there, so it's going to be a little hard to differentiate that, but this is more about selling the system because the rest of the game expansions are definitely worth picking up if you really are getting into this. So let's take it into the box. Alright, so we've kind of opened up the box here. I've set aside a few things from mostly expansion content, but just for anyone wondering, these are the sleeves that you're going to want, the green ones for the cards here, because I have a few of the cards actually sleeved. So going right into what you get in the box here, you get a Rules of Play, which does a pretty good job of explaining everything. However, I actually prefer the Universal Head, or rather the Order of Geeks little rulebook here. It's a quick way of kind of understanding how the game actually works and some of the terminology, as well as they have like little player aids, which is definitely appreciated. There's also each expansion has their own little rule books here, so you want to hold on to those so that way you have all the different rules that come with those sets. Okay, so that's the rule books kind of set aside. You're going to want to keep those. Over here we have a number of the player baggies that I've made up. There is only 5 in the base game, but every expansion comes with another color usually. 2 of the expansions I think actually don't, so be a little aware of that when you're doing your purchasing. But overall you will be able to get up to 8 players to play this game. The base game supports 5, so you're going to play 3 to 5 usually. I'd say like a 4-player game is fine, but the real good games come out when you're playing with 5 or more. So along with the ships here, you're going to have your little warp area here in the middle. This is your place where all the tokens that when they're used are going to get discarded, as well as it's your point tracker, which each of the little ship bags comes with a little point tracker there. They would be a little bit better if they stacked on top of each other or, actually made some sense, but they're actually supposed to kind of attach to themselves and onto the board here. It works out okay, but you don't want to bump it. Just to get a few things out of the way here, I've moved a few things out of the box here so we can get through them a little quicker. Sorry for the cut, but here's a bunch of just generic tokens and special tokens and, well, honestly, little planetoids and super weapons and stuff like that. These are all part of kind of some of the variants of the game, but a lot of the alien powers actually have you using some of these tokens, so I put them all in one bag. And most of the time, if you need a generic token, that's where these are going to be. You also have this little deck of tech cards here, which is another optional little expansion that comes in the box, but I usually don't play with these for newbies. So, expansion content and more expansion content. It gets kind of nuts here, folks. So we're going to move things aside here and show you kind of a setup here. So in Cosmic Encounter, you're going to have a number of your planets out. Usually for a short game you're going to play with 4, for a longer game you're going to have to play with 5. It will affect numbers and such, but they're kind of dual-sided for flair, so that way they're easier to see across the table. I keep them all in a little box here. So you're going to have your 5 planets, and you're going to have, at the beginning, basically 4 ships on every planet, so they do stack on top of each other. That's a really nice fit, so I'll kind of hold that up there so you can kind of see how they stack. And the whole point of the game is that you are trying to get 5 or 4 in the short game different colonies on other people's worlds. And the way you do that is you have an encounter with them. Now, upward to 2 times during your turn, you're actually allowed to have an encounter. Usually you're going to have one mandatory, and if you succeed, then you get to do the second one. So that's where this little Destiny deck comes in. So this Destiny deck has a number of cards in it based on the player colors that you actually put in it, as well as some special events in there that kind of help you change the game a little bit. So we'll go for an example here. I shuffle these up, I draw a wild. Perfect. So then I take another person's planet here. I allot up to 4 of my ships off of any combination of planets, and I send these off to attack that planet. So that's the best way I can kind of show you is you got your ships on here and you point at their planet, and that's the best way of representing that you are attacking them, basically, or you're having an encounter with them. Now, what you do during this part of the game is you're going to have a handful of cards, which are based out of very specific cards types. You have attack cards, artifact cards, special ability cards called flares, which are all in this bag here. Notice how they have a similar backing so that they can be actually shuffled in here. But here, this is where the real meat and potatoes of the game comes in, and I'm going to use that terminology a lot here. So basically, you have 2 types of cards that you're going to worry about. These are encounter cards. So encounter cards are special because they allow you to basically determine how you encounter somebody. They have either attacks or negotiates. There's also a third one called morph, but that pretty much just is a mimic of whatever your opponent played. So during this phase, you will, again, kind of both choose to select cards and try to outbluff each other. What you're trying to do is, if you have the higher number of combination of ships plus the number of on the card you played, you will win an attack and be able to put your ship onto their planet. And whoever loses, all of their ships, no matter what, get sent to the little warp area or out of the game for now. But you don't need to worry about that. There's a lot of abilities that'll help you get those ships back, and at the beginning of every encounter, actually, you are allowed to take one ship and put it back to anywhere you already have a ship. So, kind of a nifty little thing. That is important because if you win the first encounter, you can choose to have a second one, in which you draw yet another card off the Destiny deck, and I would have to attack the green player now. So, now that's kind of just the base game there. There's a lot of things that can kind of muddle up these rules, or muddle up, or depending on how you want to say that. And that's this entire deck of aliens. This is where I keep currently all my aliens. As you can see, there's a lot, but there's 3 different expansions, and each one's added a significant portion to them. Now, these aliens are very unique in the sense that they all have a sort of special ability that allows them to do something that nobody else can do, like the loser here. The loser means that the person who played the lower card actually wins. And you have to declare that during this so-called planning phase before you resolve that, so that way they actually know that you're trying to play for low card. But hey, again, if you have the low card, you win. And you can do this as either the attack or defense. That's kind of one of the weird wordings here, if you'll notice, of this little text on the bottom there. It'll say main player only. Now, the main players is basically anybody who's taking place in an encounter. Now, you're probably wondering, why would it specify main player only? Well, that's because during your encounter, there's actually a phase here where you can actually call for alliances. Now, alliances is a very powerful strategy that you can do where you ask other people at the table if they want to join your side for the combat. And the way this is represented is they will send a number of ships to either attack or defend against the other ships. Now, the benefits of doing it are, if you're the attacker, you actually get to put your ship with their ship as a colony on that planet. So effectively, you're getting 1 point closer to where you want to be in the game. Now, as a defender, what happens is if you win, for every ship that you committed to that, you actually get to draw more cards from the main deck, which means that you get more options for your turn and have more cards in your hand to play with, which is always a good thing in this game. One of the popular thoughts about this game is at the beginning of the game, you're building your hand for the end of the game because let's admit it here, ladies and gentlemen, you can get a shared victory in this game, but it's nowhere near as fun as winning yourself. Uh, and also, it can lead to some interesting and, well, quite honestly, inevitable betrayals. So that's kind of what I've got right here to show you. Again, you've got a lot of different little tokens for things, such as actually a new planet which is built off of some sort of explosion Genesis-like device from Star Trek 4. I have tons of stuff over here just in itself for what is expansion content. You know, you've got a little deck for different variants in the game. So I can't really go much into each of those unless you want me to for further reviews. Otherwise, what I can really say is, you know, for a first time playing this game, try to keep it easy. Play with aliens with only these little green lights in the corners during setup. So when you're building your flare deck here to determine who you're playing as, try to focus on taking green cards because it'll make your life a little bit easier and honestly a little bit more sane, because some of these red ones can get kind of confusing. So I really should stop rambling and take you right in the final thoughts right now. So, okay, so just in case you didn't know, I am a big fan of this game. I know a lot of other people are out there, so this might mean that this isn't your first time looking at a review for this. And pretty much there's a lot of things that I'm going to try to bring to the table that maybe some other people haven't said about this game before. So without any further ado, we're going to try to take it into our typical review scale here and kind of break it down. So segment by segment, we're going to start with art. So art is pretty standard in this game. You got a lot of text on every card, so you got to worry about that being a little too small at some places. However, you've got the alien cards, which is the best example of what they did for the graphic design, where you have the centerpiece face artwork, which is very well illustrated and well colored, maybe a little dark in places, but then you go into all of the text field, which, depending on what race you're playing, can be pretty varied, because what you're looking at is sometimes the text is smaller for much more elaborate abilities, I should say. Thankfully, underneath all of that text, though, you got a little rules timing construct on the bottom of the card, which I showed you earlier. And that really helps break up some of the timing issues that there are in this game. So it also helps you understand if your ability is, you know, mandatory versus optional versus if it's when you're a main player or not a main player, or if it's just an anytime ability. What I really like is the graphic design on the sides where they have the different colors and the kind of the summary of your ability presented towards the other players, so that way they can read it and understand how complex your race is compared to theirs. So you also see that a little bit on the flares, but again, there's not a lot of artwork on those cards, and you get a lot of them as well. Thankfully, everything is pretty clear to read. Maybe a few fonts could have been a little bit bolder for people who are a little hard of sight, but other than that, I'm going to have to say this is a solid 7 on artwork. You know, everything works well. There's just a lot of it. So, component quality. Oh, components. We have a lot of ships, a lot of plastic in this box, which is kind of great, except for the fact that the rest of the cardboard that they give you is the warp gate. I really wish they could have made that out of a different material because it's got a really thin edge on it, which will eventually probably get nipped off or bent. So something to keep in mind when you're playing around with the cardboard bits in this game. And of course, the victory point trackers, it would be actually a little nicer if they did stack on top of each other, much like the starships did, instead of doing this like little interlocking thing that takes up more space on the table, which you really need more of. Because, heaven forbid this, but if you're actually getting all of the expansions for this game and you're playing with up to 8 players, you're going to need a lot of real estate going on. You might even just need a second area for people to put their pawns in whenever they get destroyed. So, component-wise, I mean, the cards are nice. They're good stock. They'll last you a while. They are kind of a Euro size for the most part, though, so you're going to have to get some specialty card sleeves for this game if you intend on sleeving it. That makes it just a bit easier to handle the cards, but on the other hand, you kind of lose a little bit if you want to sleeve them and protect them because you got to get a specialty sleeve for that. So components, I really can't argue with it. Again, the lack of a decent Fantasy Flight insert is more of a pain than anything. And the presentation of the game is very elaborate, and depending on how many things you want to bring into it, you're going to have to kind of use baggies to keep the expansion pieces gone or like the technology. So it would have been nice to maybe see some organization in there. I'm going to give this for components probably about let's go an 8. 8's a good number for that because again, I like the plastic ships that do stack. That is very nice and a little bit better than the older editions if you ever feel like going back and seeing how that looked. But however, some of the cardboard bits could have used maybe a little bit of improvement or maybe some upgrading. I might later pimp out my copy just to, deal with that. So that brings us down to mechanics. Ooh, that's a touchy subject. So mechanically speaking, the base game where you're gonna kind of flipping a card, dealing with an encounter, and resolving that encounter, and then having that maybe happen again or pass the next player. That's all very sound. But the ruling on all of the alien powers and all of the flare powers and then all of the zap cards and all, oh man, it gets kind of muddled up. And there's a reason why Board Game Geek here has a whole encyclopedia, or rather the Cosmodex, of all of these rules broken down into what's explained, if it applies for certain situations. Definitely, if you have any rules issues, look at that first, because this thing can get kind of cumbersome. It's a very large game, especially with over 200, 300 aliens to play through, so there's bound to be a little bit of rules confusion in there. However, that being said, they are written fairly well, and with the little iconography on the bottom of the cards, it's very nice to be able to understand where your timing elements come in and if they apply to you. And the flare cards and the zap cards are a great kind of take that strategy. This game is very much similar to kind of a take that bluffing style game with a little bit of diplomacy thrown in here and there. It's kind of a mixed genre game. Now, if you're looking for a game that's going to be you having an elaborate space empire, this is not that kind of game. But this is a great poker night game for you and your gamer friends because this is a pure kind of social deduction game in a little sense of that because you have all these weird ally ships, you have all of these little moves that you can do. You've got your hand of cards, which is most of the time secret, but sometimes, they'll know what you have because hey, I have an alien power that lets me take the card I just played back or something like that. And there's a lot of negotiation in there with the various things that you can do. And the fact that there is negotiate cards in there just helps that even more because you got a lot more of that bidding and bluffing game. So kind of a nifty little prospect. So mechanics, I really wish I could give them higher, but I gotta give them a 7 for this. Because 7 is a good number for this because it's not broken, but can be a lot of rules confusion in there, especially for new players. And with so many rules flying about, it can get kind of muddled up. However, if you know the game and you get a little crazy, you can always do a bunch of variant rules, which do help those mechanics out a little bit more, and they throw in more complexity, so more fun to the game. That's going to be going into the replay factor too, though. So I guess I should bring that up. Replay factor is immense. I cannot tell you yeah, you're never going to have the same game twice. And if you have something similar to the same game twice, throw in one of the expansion elements in there. Have the reward deck in there from one of the expansions, or maybe throw in a few more players with another expansion. Play with satellites on your planets, or use the technology cards that come in the base game even. Ooh, so very much content. I'm not going to try to explain everything in this one, but just to let you know how the system works, it is a lot of using your ships and abilities to try to get that final, stand to get your last planet, your last colony, which may involve the shared victory with your players. But honestly, you want to win alone if you can. It's more fun that way. So replayability, 10. Definitely a 10. You might have similar gameplay, but it feels different every time because of these alien powers. They'll vastly change the game. Now, that being said, balance is one of those things that many people can criticize this game on. There is a balance in the sense that every alien has a power that's special to them, but you as a player have to really provide the the true balance of the game. Because this is one of those style of games, you want to hit the leader as hard as you can and do anything you can do to stop them. There are certain alien powers out there that just are, by default feel stronger than others. But on the other hand, allies aren't bad. It is one of your biggest resources to keep to yourself because that is literally pushing you and another person closer to the end of the game. So if you want to be the solo winner, you gotta kind of be sparing with who you actually give that privilege to. So keep that in mind when you're playing this game. So that's pretty much down through our final thoughts there. So final thoughts, I've got to give this probably still a 7 or an 8 for me. Mainly because, yes, the gameplay over time might get a little similar, but again, there's so much there to really spice it up. If you don't like the base game or you don't like the way the game plays for a certain amount, I'm not saying that a variant's going to fix that for you, but it definitely could in this case. Now, one little nuance thing here that makes me absolutely love this game is that there's a special character in the game called the Filch. Now, what they can do is you can, if you're playing it with the classic rules, you can legally cheat in the game by stealing cards from people, maybe putting more ships out than you're supposed to, taking more ships back from the war. And if anyone catches you on it, they have to be, very certain that you're cheating. And if they catch you, you lose that privilege and stuff. But it's one of those things that's really hard to replicate in the digital world. And thankfully, Tabletop Simulator is kind of there to help back that up. So definitely look at that. Again, thank you so much for your comments and feedback. Any sort of sharing of videos would be nice as well. We are through with the Sylveon and Umbreon collection, so we're kind of just looking at other games to kind of bring off the shelves and show you. So let me know if you look at my geek list at all, if you want something to be reviewed, just send me an email. So, that being said, thank you so much for watching Cards and Cardboard. Sorry to take for so long, but have a good night, everyone.